What if James Potter didn't die that night in Godric's Hollow? Not everything turns perfect, but he survives with one thing in his hand: the truth. Because if James lives, there's a witness. And then one person never goes to Azkaban. And that domino turns Harry's entire life into a different war. In Canon, James dies in seconds. No wand, no chance. Here, he gets it. And he doesn't cast a victory spell. He casts one brutal, simple thing that buys time. A blasting curse. A desperate stopper. Not much. Just a second. Voldemort strikes back. Hard. James slams into the wall, unconscious, but not dead. Lily still makes it upstairs. She still dies. The curse still rebounds. Voldemort still falls. So James wakes in the ruins, and what he sees makes him move in a way Dumbledore never expects. He wakes with dust and blood in his mouth. His throat feels like sand. He crawls through the wreckage and sees the impossible. Lily is still. Harry is screaming. Alive. Warm. For 1 second, his mind tries to invent a normal explanation. Then the second thought hits. The cold one. No one could find us. No one except the one who knew. He finds his wand with shaking fingers, and instead of calling for help first, he secures the scene. Not for the police, for the war. A quick Hymenum Revelio through the ruins. No extra heartbeats. Good. He checks his arm. No dark mark. Voldemort is gone. But that doesn't mean the danger is gone. So before anyone can take Harry from him, he whispers one name he doesn't want to believe. And he sends his first owl. Sirius. Now. Not help me. Find the traitor before someone else makes it the truth. James and Sirius don't hunt Pettigrew like grieving friends. They hunt him like men who know him too well. They know his pattern. He hides where he can see everything and be seen least. And James does something unexpected. He doesn't chase Pettigrew's body. He chases his fear. He won't run to the strong. He'll run to procedure, to a place where panic turns official, where witnesses become paperwork. So James cuts the streets that lead there. Sirius moves toward one street. James moves toward another. And between them, they build a trap that only works if you know an animagus. James crouches in a narrow alley mouth and leaves a little spill of milk and bread crust near the wall. Not as bait, as a test. A man passes it and keeps walking. A normal rat would dart, feed, and vanish. But this one pauses, just for a beat, just long enough to check who might be watching. Sirius, hidden, waiting, listening in dog form, catches it. That tiny break in movement, that hesitation that screams, "I'm trying to be small." But Pettigrew does his classic move. He tries to create a truth with a spectacle. A blur at the curb, fur becomes flesh. He shouts accusations. He draws attention. He raises his wand to tear the street open. Chaos, smoke, escape. But James is faster than the story. Expelliarmus, hard enough that the wand rockets away into stone. and Sirius follows with the simplest thing in the world: incarcerates. Ropes snap tight around Pettigrew's arms and chest, and before he can change form, James is there, wand at Pettigrew's throat. Say it. Who was the secret keeper? Pettigrew smiles, the sickest kind of smile. The "I can still win this" smile. Sirius steps closer and says something only an old friend can say. Peter, you were always afraid, but you were never stupid. So tell me, who promised you you'd survive? And Pettigrew's eyes betray him. Not his words, his eyes. James understands in that moment. The war isn't over. It just changes its face. Here's the thing most people miss. Dumbledore's blood protection with Petunia is only necessary if Harry is an orphan. But Harry isn't an orphan anymore. James lives. Dumbledore can argue, he can warn, but he can't just place Harry. James would never allow it. Which means Harry grows up as a Potter. And that sounds cozy, but it also makes him a clearer target. Dumbledore doesn't arrive like a guest. He arrives like a man who already decided. He talks about protection, blood, Petunia. It's the safest. James lets him finish, then says one sentence that makes Dumbledore go quiet. You can't ship my child like a parcel. Dumbledore tries. You don't understand. James cuts in. No, you don't understand. Lily died to protect him, not so you could own a tool. Dumbledore doesn't fully back down, but he changes shape. Softer voice. Mentor instead of general. And they reach a compromise that still feels like a Potter. Put your protections around my home, not theirs. Now Dumbledore has to protect Harry without controlling his daily life, and he hates that. Harry grows up with love, with Sirius as a constant uncle, with Remus on the edge of the picture, with Lily as a wound and a sacred presence. But Harry also grows up with the stories. Gryffindor, bravery, we win. And it makes him more like James, more confident, quicker to take risks, more likely to believe he can handle things himself. And that becomes dangerous in year one, because Hogwarts still has a stone, a teacher with a secret, and a headmaster with a plan. Harry arrives at Hogwarts already being someone. Not the boy under the stairs, the boy raised beside a living legend. James writes letters. James asks questions. James may even appear at the edge of Hogsmeade under an invisibility cloak if he has to. So when Harry mentions a corridor on the 3rd floor, James takes it seriously. And it creates the first real collision. James wants to protect Harry. Dumbledore wants to prepare him. In canon, the trio reaches the final chamber because the story needs it. Here, the adult world presses closer. Not enough to solve everything, but enough that Harry doesn't get the same free runway. The stone conflict becomes more controlled and more political. Because Dumbledore realizes something. James Potter is an obstacle to the plan. Year 2. The chamber opens. The difference? Harry has a father who believes him faster, and Sirius, who knows the darker side of the world better than Arthur Weasley ever could. They see patterns earlier. They pressure the school harder. Lockhart is exposed sooner. But the chamber is still the chamber. Tom Riddle is still dangerous. And the diary is still a trap. Year 3 is even bigger. No Sirius is a murderer story. But the Dementors can still come, and Lupin's secret still exists. So what becomes the conflict? Not Sirius hunts Harry. It becomes the Ministry won't admit its mistakes. So they use Dementors anyway, as control. Here's one of the most believable changes. If Pettigrew is caught early, Voldemort loses his convenient return plan. He can still come back, but it's later, more desperate, more risky. And that means if the Triwizard Tournament happens, it becomes a different kind of trap. And that's where the real Part 2 energy begins. Because Dumbledore has to reveal more earlier. James doesn't stop asking. James and Sirius have something the trio doesn't. They can connect war stories. Regulus Black, creature, strange artifacts, rumors from the First War. So when Dumbledore begins to suspect Horcruxes, he can't keep it as sealed. James pressures him. You know something. This is bigger than one man returning. Say what you know. Dumbledore doesn't give everything, but he gives enough. Enough that James and Sirius start hunting objects, not just people. And that creates a new problem. Harry learns more, earlier, and it changes who he becomes. Does it make him stronger, or does it make him colder? James reads between every line Dumbledore speaks. Every time Dumbledore says courage, it sounds a little too much like preparation. One night, James watches Harry sleep. Scar on his forehead, slow breathing, a child's face. And James does something he's never done before. He goes to the restricted section. Not to find power, to find out Dumbledore is wrong. He searches for one sentence, a way to remove a piece of soul without anyone dying. He finds nothing. And that's when he understands the brutal truth. Surviving Godric's Hollow wasn't the end. It was the start. Dumbledore doesn't introduce Horcruxes like a lecture. He admits them like a confession. He sits with James and Sirius, and you can tell he hates this, because he doesn't like giving people power over his plan. There is a kind of magic, he says, that divides the soul. And Sirius reacts to the word divides, like Regulus. Dumbledore freezes, just a fraction, but James sees it. And James realizes something terrifying. Dumbledore knows more than he's saying. And the black name has always been a key. Dumbledore doesn't say, Harry is a Horcrux. Not yet. But he says something that lands worse in a father's chest. There may be a price that cannot be avoided. James goes pale. Sirius clenches his jaw. And for the first time, they aren't just soldiers in the Order. They're opponents to an idea. Because now the question changes. If James knows a price is coming, does he try to save Harry from it and make everything more dangerous? No matter how much James survives, no matter how early they trace Horcruxes, there's a rule in this world that's almost impossible to dodge. If Harry still carries a piece of Voldemort, that piece has to die. So the tragedy doesn't vanish. It moves closer. The difference is, when the time comes, Harry isn't alone. Not the lone hero. James is there. Imagine that scene. James understanding what it means and realizing he can't stop it without breaking the world. That is a different kind of war. And the most brutal part? James survives the night in Godric's Hollow, only to maybe watch his son walk into the forest later. So does everything get better if James lives? No, but it becomes different, more organized, less manipulation from the adult world, but also more pressure, more legacy, more eyes on Harry all the time. Now it's your turn, because this timeline proves something brutal. James living doesn't erase the price. It just means Harry isn't alone when it comes due. But if you want the next domino, we can go even darker. What if Lily survives Godric's Hollow, and that makes Voldemort stronger? Because if Lily lives, she's not just a protector, she becomes the key. Imagine Voldemort stops hunting Harry's blood and starts hunting hers. Not with a duel, with a needle. A doctor at St. Mungo's, too kind, too careful, and Lily feels it, like her magic is being pulled like a thread. So here's the question. Do you want part 2 to be the Lily timeline? Comment 1. If you want a different what if next, comment 2 and tell me your idea.